Harihi Om. Pranamaha. Let's begin today's class with a small prayer. Pathami Samskritam Nityam Vadami Samskritam Sada Dhyayami Samskritam Samyak Vande Samskrita Mataram. Welcome. Today we shall study about Ach Sandhihi, which is also called as Swara Sandhihi. Like I have already explained in the previous class, in Sandhis we have three types. That is Ach Sandhihi, or also called as Swara Sandhihi, Hal Sandhihi, otherwise known as Vyanjana Sandhihi, and Visarga Sandhihi. Firstly, we shall revise Sandhi Vikaraha. As we have already discussed, in Sandhis we have two words, that is Purvapadam and Parapadam. When these two words come very close, then Sandhi Vikaraha arises. When the Purvapadam and the Parapadam come close, then we have something called Sandhi Vikaraha. Now look here, there is a Purvapadam and after that a Parapadam. The letter or Aksharam that occupies the last position of the Purvapadam, as we have already seen, is called the Purva Varnaha, which is depicted as orange color here. Similarly, the first letter of Parapadam is called Paravarnaha, which you can see as green color here. So what is understood here is that Sandhihi takes place between a Purva Varnaha and a Paravarnaha. When Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha come quite close, then any of the Sandhi Vikaraha, like we have discussed, can happen. Let's revise the Sandhi Vikaraha as well. We have seen that there are four types of Sandhi Vikaraha. The first one being Adeshaha. The second, Agamaha. The third one is Lopaha. And the fourth, Prakruti Bhavaha. Now, how do Sandhi Vikaraha arise? We have four types, right? That is Adeshaha, Agamaha, Lopaha and Prakruti Bhavaha. Adeshaha comes into picture when two letters, that is the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha, come very close, and that gives rise to the entry of one and exit of one letter as well. What about Agamaha? In Agamaha, there is only entry of one letter or Aksharam, but there is no loss or exit of any letter. In Agamaha, there is only an entry but no loss or exit of any letter. Now coming to Lopaha. There is no entry of any letter, but one letter disappears. When does Prakriti Bhavaha happen? When there is neither entry nor exit of any letters between the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha, then it is called Prakriti Bhavaha. Now let's revise Sandhi Prakaraha as well. Ach Sandhi, Hal Sandhi and Visarga Sandhihi are the three types of Sandhi which we have already seen. When do we call a Sandhi as Ach Sandhihi? When both the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha are Swaraksharani, then we call that Sandhihi as Swara Sandhihi. Similarly, when a Vyanjanaksharam comes quite close to another Vyanjanaksharam or a Swaraksharam in some cases, it is then called Hal Sandhihi or Vyanjana Sandhihi. In case of Swadi Sandhihi or Visarga Sandhihi, the position of Purva Varnaha is occupied by a Visargaha, and the Paravarnaha can either be a Swaraksharam or a Vyanjanaksharam, because we know that Visarga can never occupy the first letter of any word. Visarga must always come after a Swaraksharam only. Now let's study in detail about Swara Sandhihi or Ach Sandhihi. We already know that this arises when two swaraksharani come very close. In such cases, we can observe adeshaha, which means there is both an entry as well as an exit of a letter. In adeshaha, we have two types. The first one is called ekadeshaha and the second being samanyadeshaha. Now let's understand the difference between them. When two letters come very close, then the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha both disappear, and in their place there is an entry of one letter or aksharam. In such cases, we call it ekadeshaha. Similarly, in case of samanyadeshaha, when again the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha come very close, only the Purva Varnaha disappears, and in its place another letter gives its entry. So, there is entry of one aksharam and exit of one aksharam. But in ekadeshaha, we have seen exit of two letters and entry of one letter. Now moving forward, we have already seen that the exit of two letters invites one letter to occupy their position. Based on which letter enters, we have different types of sandhihi. For example, when there is an entry of the letters a, e, u, r, we call it dirgha sandhihi or savarna dirgha sandhihi. You might be wondering why they are called so. That's because the letters a, e, u, r are dirghaksharani. So, when a dirghaksharam enters, we call such a sandhihi as dirgha sandhihi. Why have they used the word savarnaha? The Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha both belong to the same class of letters like a and a or e and e. Hence, they are called Savarna Dirgha Sandhihi. Now, we shall study the second type, that is Guna Sandhihi. In Sanskritam, the three letters a, o and ar are called Gunaha. Whenever we observe that any of these letters have entered a sandhi, we call such a sandhi as Guna Sandhihi. Next, the three letters I, au and r are called Vruddhihi. Vruddhihi in Sanskritam means to grow. Observe the difference between a, o, r and I, au, r. So, whenever there is an entry of any of the three letters I, au and r, it is then called Vruddhi Sandhihi. All the above three types belong to Ekadeshaha type of Adeshaha. That is, in the place of Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha, there is an entry of one letter. It may be either Dirgha Sandhihi, Guna Sandhihi or Vruddhi Sandhihi. We shall now study the fourth type of Sandhihi, that is Yan Sandhihi. In Maheshwara Sutrani, the letters Ya, Va, R, La belong to the group Yan. So, whenever we observe the entry of any of these letters, that is Ya, Va, R and La, we call such a Sandhi as Yan Sandhihi. Similarly, whenever we have the letters A, O in the position of Purva Varnaha, we call such type of Sandhi as Purva Rupa Sandhihi. How do we identify a Purva Rupa Sandhihi? It's very simple. Whenever we see an Avagraha Chinham in between a word, what is an Avagraha Chinham? It is very similar to the S alphabet. We can understand that a Purva Rupa Sandhi is involved. The last type of Sandhi we have is called Yantavantadesha Sandhihi, where any of the four letters I, Av, I and Av enter in the form of Adeshaha. Why is it named Yantavanta? Observe carefully, in I and I, the last letter is Ya, hence Yanta. Similarly, in Av and Av, the last letter is Va. Therefore, Vanta. In all these three types, only the Purva Varna disappears and another Aksharam occupies its place. Therefore, they are Samanyadeshaha. Moving forward, let us understand how Sandhis takes place. In the place of Purva Varna, all the letters A, I, U, R, R, E, O, I, Au have been shown. Similarly, even in the place of Paravarnaha, we have all the Swaraksharani. Now observe carefully, wherever we get a situation where Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha, both of them are occupied by the same letter, then we call them Savarna Dirgha Sandhihi. Given another situation where the Purva Varnaha is A, but the Paravarnaha may be I, U or R, then such Sandhis are called Guna Sandhihi. Note carefully, in Sanskritam, A doesn't mean only A. It can be A as well. Both these letters are treated equally. Same is the case with I, U and R as well. Hence, Dirghaksharani are not displayed here. Moving forward, when we come across another case where the Purva Varnaha is again occupied by A, but now the Paravarnaha is either A, O, I or Au, then we classify such Sandhis as Vriddhi Sandhihi. Let us now try to understand the fourth type of Sandhihi, which is called Yan Sandhihi. When we have the letters I, U, R and Dr in the place of Purva Varnaha and any of the Swaraksharani in place of Paravarnaha except another letter of its own kind, then such Sandhis are called Yan Sandhihi. In another given case, when we observe that the Purva Varnaha is occupied by A or O and the Paravarnaha is the letter A. Now this is a point to be noted carefully. A must be a Hrisvaksharam only and not a Dirghaksharam A. Only in such cases it is called Purva Rupa Sandhihi. Now again, when the Purva Varnaha is any of the four letters A, I, O or Au and the Paravarnaha being any Swaraksharam except that of its own kind, it is then called Yantavantadesha Sandhihi. We shall study each of these in detail, giving examples. Firstly, let's understand Savarna Dirgha Sandhihi. Purva Varnaha is A. Paravarnaha is also A, which means it can either be A or A. When you observe carefully, you find that both the A letters disappear and instead the letter A enters to take its position in the form of Ekadeshaha. For example, we have two words Mura and Arihi. Here, when we break each of these words to their respective constituent letters, we have got M, U, R, A for Mura and A, R, Ihi for Arihi. The Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha both are occupied by the letter A. Both these letters disappear, as we have already discussed, to give way to the letter A. So, the joining of the two words Mura and Arihi becomes Murarihi. Sometimes we are asked to split a word with E in it. It can be done by just placing E and E in place of Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha. Let's understand this with the help of an example. How do we split the word Bhavatiti? Observe that there is a Dirgha E Aksharam in the word. So it can be split as Bhavati and Iti. Quite simple, right? Let's move forward. when we have the letter U, after U, it may either be Hrisva or Dirgha, like I have already told before. Then the letter U enters instead of these two letters. In the example Guru plus Upadeshaha, the two words are broken into letters now. The Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha again disappear for the final word to become Gurupadeshaha. Similarly, in some cases, R can also be broken down into R and R. Like in case of Matrunam, the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha both must be R. So, it can be broken as Matru and Rinam. This is all about Savarna Dirgha Sandhihi. We shall now learn Guna Sandhihi also in detail. As already discussed in Guna Sandhihi, the Purva Varnaha can only be A or A. If the Paravarnaha is E, then the letter A appears after the disappearance of both the Purva Varnaha and Paravarnaha. For example, Tava plus Idam becomes Tavedam. Let's take another case. When the letter A in the position of Purva Varnaha is followed by the letter U, then O Aksharam enters in the form of Ekadeshaha. This can be understood with the example Jnana plus Udayaha, which when joined, it becomes Jnanodayaha. Let's now understand the third example as well. When A is followed by R, the Aksharam Ar enters. For example, Deva plus Rishihi becomes Devarshihi. This is all about Guna Sandhihi. Now, we shall study Vruddhi Sandhihi. Similar to Guna Sandhihi, even here the Purva Varnaha is A or A, and when the Paravarnaha is A, the Aksharam I enters as a Ekadeshaha. For example, Eka plus Ekam, how do you join them? You can join them by adding an I in between. So it becomes Ekaikam. Similarly, even when A is followed by I, the Aksharam I enters in between. This can be understood in the example Mata plus Aikyam. When combined, becomes Mataikyam. What do you think happens when A is followed by O? Yes, you got it right. These letters disappear, giving rise to the letter Au. Let's take a look at the example. Vana plus Oshadhihi. When we remove A and O with the addition of Au, we get the word Vanaushadhihi. Similarly, when A is followed by Au, even then these two letters disappear and another Aksharam Au enters in the form of Ekadeshaha. For example, Tava plus Audaryam. When combined by removing A and Au with the addition of another letter Au becomes Tavaudaryam. We shall now study the next type, that is Yan Sandhihi. In Yan Sandhihi, E is the Purva Varnaha, whereas the Paravarnaha can be any Swaraksharam except for E. This is because we have already discussed that when the same letters are repeated, it becomes Savarna Dirgha Sandhi, isn't it? Therefore, Paravarnaha can be any swaraksharam other than E or E. In such cases, E is replaced by Ya as Samanyadeshaha. Let us take an example of Iti plus Uvacha. Let us break each of these words. In the position of Purva Varnaha, we have the letter E, and in the place of Paravarnaha, we have the letter U. Now, only the letter E disappears, but U stays there. Now, insert another letter Y in between. It finally becomes Ityuvacha. Since only the Purva Varnaha disappears and Ya enters, it is Samanyadeshaha type of Adeshaha. Now let's split the word Sadhvidam. Firstly, we shall write its constituent letters. Sa, A, Dh, V, I, D, Am. Now observe, in between we have one aksharam that belongs to the group Yan. Which letter is that? Yes, it's V from Yavarala. So now, instead of V, we shall bring the letter U. In the place of I, U, R, R, the letters Ya, V, R, L enter in the form of Adeshaha in Yan Sandhi. So now we shall split this to get Sadhu plus Idam. Let's have a look at yet another example. When the aksharam R is followed by any swaraksharam except R itself, it becomes R. Let's understand this better with the help of this example. Matru plus Agnya becomes Matragnya with the addition of a Repa. Moving forward to the next example, when R followed by any swaraksharam other than R itself, since it again becomes Savarna Dirgha Sandhi like we have already discussed, it turns out to become Lakaradeshaha. Here's an example to understand this better. R plus Adeshaha becomes Ladeshaha, that is Samanyadeshaha. The next Sandhi is Purvarupa Sandhi. A must occupy the position of Purva Varnaha and the Paravarnaha must only be the letter A and not A. This is an exception to be noted carefully. All this while, we have said that in the place of A can also be used, but only in Purva Rupa Sandhi that cannot be the case. In this Sandhi, Avagraha Chinham is added. What is an Avagraha Chinham? It is very similar to the S of the English alphabet. For example, Te plus Api becomes Tepi with the loss of the letter A, but in its place we have added the Avagraha Chinham. Similarly, after O Aksharam, when we have the letter A but not A, we add Avagraha Chinham. This is a very simple Sandhi. We have seen here that Namo plus Astu becomes Namostu. The last type of Sandhi is Yantavantadesha Sandhi. In the first example, we have A as the Purva Varnaha and any Swaraksharam as the Paravarnaha except A. Why do you think A shouldn't be present? That's because when A is present, it becomes Purva Rupa Sandhi. Here, A disappears to give way to I. Hare plus Ehi. Now remove A, it becomes Har, add I, so it becomes Haraya plus Ehi, which turns out to become Harayehi. Remove only the Purva Varnaha, the Paravarnaha must remain as such. Now to the second example. After O, we have any of the Swaraksharani again with the exception of A. O disappears, and av enters. So it is Vantadesha Sandhihi. Guro plus iha becomes Guraviha. Remove O and add av. That's the only simple formula. The third example is as follows. After I, we have any swaraksharani. Here, there are no exceptions. It can be any of the swaraksharam including a. Then we have I as the adeshaha. In nai plus akaha, I is the purva varnaha and a the paravarnaha. Now remove the letter I, so only n remains. Inserting I in between these two words gives rise to the combined word Nayakaha. When any of the swaraksharani follow av becomes the adeshaha in place of au. Here's an example to understand this better. We have tau plus ubhau. Now remove au and bring av into the picture. So it finally becomes tavubhau. Tau plus ubhau combines to become tavubhau. So these are the 6 types of swarasandhayaha that we have learned today. We shall study the other 2 types, that is Vyanjana Sandhihi and Visarga Sandhihi in detail in our upcoming classes. Dhanyavadaha.